Welcome back to the show. Last month's Navy Yard shooting triggered a big discussion on mental health. Joining us now to talk about how violent video games and the internet play into mental health issues is Andrew Doan. Welcome back to the show, Andrew.
Thank you for having me back. It's great to be here.
I've got to tell you, I have always known instinctively as a parent that violent video games would permeate children's pores and then become a part of their psyche and their behavior on some level. So I just don't even allow them in my house.
Well, you know, the peer-reviewed research is very clear. In 2001, the U.S. Surgeon General published a huge report to show that violent video games causes violence in the short term and the intermediate term.
Now, will you break that down for us so we understand that?
Sure. So this is research out of Iowa State by Bushman, Anderson, and also Douglas Gentile. What they show is that the violent video games, especially preteens, can cause antisocial behavior. So if you have a little boy who is actually well behaved, when they play violent video games, their blood pressure can actually rise to 190 over 140 within 20 minutes of play. They are immersed in this violence, and so their cortisol levels increase. Their body is ready for fight or flight, so that's why they act out. So they can swear, they swear at their parents, they can actually punch holes through the drywall. There's some kids who actually throw the remote control through the drywall. So those are antisocial personality disorders that can actually manifest through violent video games.
The act of, so you see the videos behind as they're shooting at human targets, okay? When, in what situations does that act, that behavior then generalize into real life when it becomes not just a video game anymore, they're reenacting that behavior in real life? Because you hear about all these shootings, especially with mental health patients.
And our society is ignoring this data, and I think it's dangerous because in preteens, when their frontal lobes aren't developed yet, so you look at brain scans, a preteen brain does not fully develop until they're 25. They can't distinguish between right and wrong, and they can't put the brakes on in terms of their behavior. So in teenagers, it's very dangerous to expose them to this kind of footage. So out of Harvard, back in 1990, there was a research paper that showed that basically when people play the game Tetris, they had these invasive images of the Tetris blocks in their minds. And what's fascinating about that research is that 3 research subjects had traumatic brain injury. They could not recall playing the games, but they could recall the blocks that they saw in the video game.
It like burns an image in their brain.
Yeah, so they hypothesized that basically the games bypass the regular learning and memory channels that human beings go through, and somehow it just burns the images right into their brains. So apply the Tetris effect to someone with mental illness. Apply the Tetris effect with somebody who has maybe Down syndrome or Asperger's, right? So these images are now burned in their minds, and they dream about it. They think about it all the time, and that can be dangerous.
And parents, I know if you have children and your child watched maybe a scary movie or whatever, they've come in and gotten in bed with you, they've had a nightmare because of this maybe same theory. Does that apply to that?
Absolutely.
Okay.
So that's how the brains work. And so what's amazing is that there are brain scan studies by Dr. Daniel Amen that shows that the brain when we're sleeping, in REM sleep, actually is very active. And that's when our actions and behaviors are solidified. So what we think about during the day, we actually dream at night. So that Tetris effect study at Harvard was key because what we are exposed to, let's say this one shooter at the Navy Yard, for example, he was playing more than 16 hours a day of violent video games. His friends and his mother were worried about him. They had to bring food to the computer because he wouldn't leave to eat. So imagine that type of mental illness mixed with the Tetris effect. That's a deadly combination that we're completely ignoring in our society.
And it seems to me, we report more and more increases of violent behavior, and it's usually parallel to mental illness. So I also feel like mental health illness is on a rise. Have you researched the same?
Absolutely.
issues?
Our country is so behind in treating our mental ill. We push drugs and we push pills, but really, when you break it down, people are mentally ill because of things that happened during their childhood and the environments they're raised in, as well as being born with genetic predisposition as well. But we ignore it. We just try to medicate it.
It's unbelievable. So what is your advice? I had mentioned earlier, I don't allow violent video games. I never have, not when my children were little. They watched like Dora the Explorer. They learned some Spanish, and it's been healthy. Now we do the Wii, anything to get exercise on a healthy level. We dance and we have like family competitions. The only time it gets aggressive is when my girls get a little competitive. It's not even them really, it's mommy, because I can't win to save my life. But I mean, that stuff's okay, right? That's healthy.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So everything in moderation. Less than an hour a day of screen time is what's recommended.
Yeah.
Follow the ratings on the video games. Do not let mature only and adult only content in the hands of the teenagers. The Grand Theft 5 Auto.
I was just thinking cars. Oh my gosh! I was thinking if they're watching the cars, why wouldn't that generalize when they get their own car?
Yes.
Right?
But Grand Theft Auto was a huge game that was released last month. They made $1 billion in a day, $1 billion,
Yeah.
and a majority of those sales were actually to parents who gave them to their teenage kids.
Now, why you're here today, if memory serves me right, is because you had an addiction to video games. It was making you withdrawn. You were losing precious family time with your family, right? And
Absolutely,
yeah. And
I was playing 50 to 100 hours a week, and I did that for 10
Yeah.
years during medical school. I almost lost my medical career. I was raging on my wife. She slapped a restraining order on me.
Wow.
I mean, now we're married, and we're going to be going into our 18th year of marriage, but at the time, I was also very violent, and I understand the rage. I understand what these games do to the mind. As a physician, as a research scientist, and as well as a former gaming addict. So I think I'm in a unique position to be able to speak about this topic because of the fact
personal
that
experience.
I can, yes, my
and
personal
you've
experience.
evolved out of it. I will tell you, I have a very close friend of mine whose husband plays video games all the time. And, you know, and they are violent video games, but that's the, I wouldn't say timeout period, but that's that person's release. Is that a healthy way to get a release, or is that actually doing more damage than good?
I think in adults,
Yeah.
if they do not manifest antisocial behavior outside the video games, I think there are healthy ways to have the release. I think violent video games should not be in the hands of teenagers or the mentally ill. So if you see somebody, now let's say that friend's husband is playing 20 hours a day or even let's say 10 hours a day, that's abnormal. So
Yeah.
people should then
So what is
raise a red
normal?
flag.
Like when adults still play, because it blows my mind. Adult men still play video games. I'm like, what? I don't get it. But if that's their release, everybody's got a release. Some
That's
people
correct.
watch stupid trash television, reality TV. So if that's their release, what is a healthy time period?
It's not about the time actually spent in an
Yeah.
activity, it's about the ramifications. So is he skipping chores? Is he not cleaning the house? Is he skipping work?
Is he yeah.
ignoring the wife?
Is he still affectionate to the wife? Yeah.
That's right. So it's really the consequences of excessive play that we have to look at. And that's what my goal is, to raise awareness that this could be signs and symptoms. Excessive play could be a sign or a symptom of serious underlying depression or other issues, antisocial issues in the individual.
I don't know. If you need escapism, forget reality TV, forget violent video games, try yoga. I don't know. Do something healthy that'll make you better at everything you do and make you a better parent, husband, wife, whatever.
I agree. We only have
Yeah.
24 hours a day, and how we feed our minds affect our behavior
Yeah.
and who we are. So yes, pick healthy outlets to concentrate the aggressive outlets and release.
Or a glass of wine. No, I'm kidding. I'm joking.
In moderation.
Everything in moderation. Thank you so much. Is there anything that we haven't covered that we need to discuss to give our viewers valuable tips?
Just want to emphasize again, follow the ratings on the video games. Less than an hour a day is probably okay, and look for signs and symptoms of problematic play in individuals who do, play excessively.
And especially if you have a child that shows any signs of mental illness, depression, bipolar, anything, or if you're concerned at all, do not introduce the violent video games.
Absolutely.
Just put them in timeout, hide them, throw them away.
Absolutely.
All right, thank you so much for coming on the show. Thank you, so
No, thank you for inviting
so
me.
beneficial. Thank you.